All right, as my clock just ticked over that minute, I want to be true to my word. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to just introduce myself first. I am Christy Wood Turner, and I am the director here at the Center for Community Engagement. I'm also the Assistant Dean for Community Engagement in Extension Service. So super excited to be here and happy that all of this came together, and love seeing all of the like-minded folks on the screen with us here today. In that, I did want you guys to know a little bit about who's here. If I don't mention you, please feel free to drop in the chat where you're from, but we have other institutions that have joined us today, such as Kansas State and UVA Wise. Welcome. Someone from John Deere. We have folks from the West Virginia University Institute of Technology, WVU Tech. We have 22 agencies or companies, 65 of our great WVU faculty and staff that have registered, and over 15 graduate students. So that's a really exciting group to have with us. So welcome. We have folks from the Center for Excellence in Disabilities, Public Education Collaborative, Engineering, of course, Extension is supporting, the higher ed program, WVU Medicine, WVU Libraries, and the list goes on and on. So to understand that this kind of scholarship that we're doing at the university is so fully ingrained in the work that we do as a land grant is really exciting. And to see that interdisciplinary kind of showing of support is great as well. So we hope that we have everything for, or something for everyone today, but we want to kick it off pretty quickly so that we have a lot of time to talk. And I'd like to introduce kind of our leader in this area, and that is our Dean, Dr. Jorge Atiles. As Dean of Extension and Engagement and the director of the WVU Extension, Dr. Atiles develops and executes a positive vision and supports and advances the comprehensive land grant mission of WVU in all of our 55 counties. An innovative and dynamic leader, as you will see, he is committed to furthering WVU's mission of teaching, scholarship, and engagement through strategic action, while creating opportunities that are associated with diverse programs in the cooperative extension service. He is focused on strengthening communities by working collaboratively with key partners to expand outreach and programming opportunities that address the needs of West Virginians. In addition to his role with WVU Extension, Dr. Atiles holds a faculty appointment as professor at the WVU Davis College of Agriculture, Natural Resource, and Design. Prior to this time he spent at Oklahoma State, he served as in various roles at the University of Georgia in Athens, including the Associate Dean for Outreach and Extension in the College of Family and Consumer Sciences. Dean Atiles is a champion of community engaged scholarship and a direct influence on the focus of the reciprocal and mutually beneficial engagement efforts here at WVU. These efforts that he has advanced and led at WVU will improve the lives and livelihoods of all West Virginians. So we're really excited to allow him a little bit of time to talk to you before we get started today. So welcome our Dean, Dean Jorge Atiles.
Thank you very much, Christy. We are so happy to have everybody here attending this first session of our series on community engagement at WVU. And I want to also welcome our distinguished panel that will be introduced more formally later. They're phenomenal people there, and I hope you get something out of this first session. So I was tasked with giving you a little bit of a context of where community engaged scholarship is at WVU and to give you some background. So I'm gonna just use some time to do a little presentation here, and we'll go from there. Let's share and let's see if that works. So there, can you all see that? Perfect. So, you know, for those of you who are very familiar with WVU, we are very centered around purpose. So when you think about purpose, what does that mean? When you look at the dictionary, it's the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. So I want to start this introduction around purpose because President Gordon Gee, is a tremendous support for engagement and for purpose. And that's one of the things that our universities, if you are present here and you are a public university, a land grant university, you know, we have a higher purpose. We have a purpose to be able to engage with those who we serve across our state. Land grant universities, public university, the state is your campus. not only your resident campus, but the campus in which you work. So as an example, extension is the largest outreach unit of the university, right? We are in every single county, as Dr. Wood Turner mentioned. So, but we exist to improve lives and livelihoods. That is our purpose. And when you think about that, we need to learn from West Virginians. And this is what the beginning of the concepts of community engagement will be discussed today. From the extension perspective, we cannot pretend to be the kind of university that just shows up, right? And tells you, what if you do this, you're going to be just wonderful. We're going to engage with you, but you just do what we say. And that's wonderful. Well, it's not. We used to do that as an academy across the nation, frankly, probably across the world, because we were very secure in our knowledge. We held the knowledge. For God's sake, we had the library on our campus, where that compiles all that knowledge. We get PhDs. We know all this. But when it comes to community engagement, and you're going to discuss that much later, that reciprocal, mutually beneficial relationship and the mutual respect is so critical. So we learn an extension from West Virginia. We ask questions, we investigate, we hear, we listen. So we can then come back and formulate, hopefully with them as well, knowledge that will work, that may be able to be implemented in terms of an education that can change lives and livelihoods. So when you think about overall at WVU, what we are trying to do when it comes to community engagement is to find a way to work collaboratively, to build strong university and community partnerships. And Dr. Christy Wood Turner have been engaged in that work here at the university for a long time, in the different iterations of the center that will be discussed later. But one of the things that has to be important here is that we have to anchor that collaboration in the rigorous scholarship and scientific knowledge, because we could do harm and we don't want to do right. We don't want to do that. And we need to, this needs to be designed to help build community and university capacity. In the past, we thought, oh, well, we can go and help. And again, help people help themselves, build their capacity. But frankly, we need to build our own capacity too, to be able to get there. And just by attending this first part of our series, you helping build yourself into that capacity need that we have as a university. Oh, yeah, and a set of universities represented here today. So when we hope that we're going to be able to have an impact as an engaged institution, we want to improve retention and decrease time to graduation through engagement, support for students' degree and career choice. I mean, so many times we have students that come to campus and they don't know what they want to do, or they start in a career. And when they have that experiential opportunity to really see their work and be able to partner with others, sometimes they change career. Sometimes they decide, well, this is not for me. Many times they say, wow, this is so exciting. I am totally engaged. I am not quitting college. I am staying in. I'm going to see this through. So that satisfaction on that quality student learning can also be measured by the scholarship that has happened, that has been published around engaged work. So we also want to have new avenues for research and publication. We want to have a stronger commitment to engage research. We want to complement that town and gown relationship. And we want to provide opportunity for transdisciplinary work, because there's no one discipline that can have a solution to everything that needs to be solved. We need to work together and find that knowledge, that effective way of developing, transmitting, and applying knowledge for the public good. And that's an important thing. As a public and land grant university, we need to do things that are in the public good. It actually helps us justify part of why we get state money, why we are a land grant university, why, in 1862, we were granted land that was not ours for us to be able to develop this phenomenal educational enterprise. So as part of the background, nationally, the movement around community engagement started early. There was the Dillman study in 1995 about what the public wants from higher education. So the public was telling us what they were expecting from us. And they wanted to improve and increase engagement. And then in 1999, and President Gee was the chair of that first commission, the Kellogg Commission of Presidents, to be able to put together a report on the future of higher education. So they actually came up with concepts around the engaged university, that we needed to have that reciprocal partnership defined by mutual respect and mutual learning among collaborative partners. And that was in 1999, folks. It's been a long time. And we've been working and chipping at it every year in many different universities to try to get this done. So when we think about the scholarship of engagement, right? What is it? You know, it happens, it's not one part of the mission of a university. It should be embedded in your teaching, your research, and or your service. It intentionally engages student, faculty, and staff in academically relevant work. So many times people ask, well, I volunteer at my church, I'm on the whatever committee. Say, okay, is that tied to your work at the university? Is that tied to a learning outcome? Is that tied to something that academically you can argue, you can publish about it, things of that sort? So that's something that we will be discussing next year. What is community engaged research? What is community engaged work really within the university context? We want to make sure that what we're doing is meeting those goals of the university. We have 3 pillars of the university, with purpose being a 4th pillar embedded in all 3, which is education, health, and prosperity. So we want to engage in things that are going to help us fill into those 3 great missions and goals of the university. And this, again, the scholarly agenda contributes to the public good. So we need to accomplish 3 things, at least. We must be organized to respond to the needs of today's students and tomorrow's, not yesterday. And I will argue the same thing for our communities that we partner with. We must enrich student experiences by bringing that research and engagement into the curriculum. Because if we go out there and learn from our partners, right? And we are able to demonstrate through our discovery that some things actually work when implemented, bring it back, incorporate into your syllabi. Make sure that the students are learning from that experience and that you continue to learn. This is not an ending learning a goal. It's always shifting. It's always growing, and offer those practical opportunities for students to prepare the world that we enter. And what is now the WVU Center for Community Engagement, headed by Christy, used to be the Center for Service and Learning. And it was very focused on volunteer work, and it was very focused on experiential learning. And we have escalated that now further. Now we are in the business of also working directly with faculty to be able to help faculty help us and help each other grow in the area of community engagement. So we're gonna hopefully, and this is an example, putting critical resources, knowledge and expertise to work on the problems of communities that we serve. So just so you know, we are a Carnegie classified university, but also back in the day, they came up with an elective classification, which is not new anymore. It's been around, almost a couple of decades. But it started by looking at curricular engagement. Actually, started by looking at outreach and partnerships, and then curricular engagement. So universities started by, oh yeah, we partner with all these folks, put a list together, send that over, and okay, yeah, you got classified. Then Carnegie said, well, that's not enough. I mean, you partner with all these folks, but what are you doing in your curriculum? Are you incorporating that? Are you ensuring that the education you're providing to generate the next workforce is including what you're learning? So curricular engagement became part of that. Then the 3rd iteration of it had both combined. Then now we are in a 4th iteration, which is what we're going to be working on for our next turn for our Carnegie classification. So in 2020, we completed the last version of it. So we are still classified, but we have homework. And part of that homework is we need to have a centralized data collection. We need to offer professional development of engaged scholars, which starts today. We need to have a consistency of definitions. What is engagement? We need to make sure that we are promoting and making people aware of the efforts in community engagement. We need to reward and recognize engaged scholars and programs. And as you know, the university is going through a process of modifying its P&T, promotion and tenure guidelines. And One of the biggest pieces of that was the incorporation of very specific language around community engaged scholarship in all 3 missions of the university. And then how do we assess that community-based learning and scholarship? And I know I have 5 minutes, so I'm gonna make it. And then I already talked about promotion and tenure. And for those of you who want to learn more about our efforts, go to communityengagement.w.edu. See, Christy, I gave you some free advertisement here. All right. So what can you do? Think about it. And Tammy, don't hate me because I use a picture that I had from you from a while ago, but you can participate in the Engagement Academy that we are starting today. It's sponsored by us in the Center for Community Engagement, also by the Provost Office. We have, they are actually endorsing our work and helping us. There's also the Emerging Engagement Scholars. Young faculty and grad students can actually apply and enter into a program. And this was something that our own panelist here today, Dr. Tammy Moore from Oklahoma State University, helped create this program back in the day. And it's phenomenal. We had already people participated a year ago, 2 years ago, actually, when I came here, and it's going great. That's done through the Engagement Scholarship Consortium that you see down there. When I came here, we also enter that consortium of universities, not only the United States, but in other parts of the world. And something else that you can do, publish your work. There are many venues in which you can publish your work around community engagement. So I think that's it. So I made my time. I'm happy to answer any quick questions that you may have, and then we can move on to the meat of the meeting today. I'm excited that you guys are here.
All right. Thank you so much. And we will try to incorporate some questions, and we will actually have our staff is following the chat. So if you have something in there, know that that is being seen and that we will work that in if we can when possible. So thanks again, Dean. Always an inspiration and super exciting to see this kind of work. Not only does it feel good, it does good. It is great quality academic work, and we're really excited to kind of continue to see where this goes at West Virginia University. I would now like.
Let me say one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
Just so you know, we have because I sit on the Council of Deans with the provost. I am able to engage all the different deans and administrative units on campus. We are all supporting the effort of growing our engaged scholarly work. And I also want you to know that this is not restricted, and I hope that you get in this, to faculty. Professional staff play a critical role in community engagement. And there's a whole system of support in community engaged scholarship for professional staff and also the students. We talk about them being a recipient of community engaged learning and so forth, but there could be a tremendous force. And I am so happy that we have students sitting here today in this meeting, because you are our future. And we hope that we can actually brainwash you into community engaged scholarship so you can continue to elevate something that matters. You remember I talk about purpose. So why do we teach? Why do we do discovery? Why do we do service? It's for a purpose, right? We're hoping to do something for the betterment of something, right? Or someone. So always keep that in mind. And when you're thinking about what kind of thesis or dissertation you want to do, look at your own state. Look at what we may be going through. Try to investigate, try to teach, try to do service around something that matters, something that can critically change things for the better.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. And I will add, also enhance the learning in your classroom, because students absolutely get that visual and connection, and they make those kind of theory to life connections when they're actually seeing that this is making that change. Thank you so much, Dean, for that inspiration there. I'm going to go ahead and kick this over to our moderator today so that we have plenty of time to talk to the panelists. I'm going to introduce to you Dr. McHenry Sorber. She's the coordinator of our higher education Education Administration program. Dr. McHenry Sorber has been an associate professor in the program since 2014. Prior to coming to WVU, she worked as an assistant professor at Wilkes University. Her research centers on the internal and external structures and contexts that influence rural schools and communities and their relationships. She has authored papers in the Peabody Journal of Education, the International Journal of Inclusive Education, the Journal of Rural Social Sciences, and Leadership and Policy in Schools. The former publication focuses were on rural school community conflict and the politicization of rural community identity. 2 words in that same sentence that I do not say very well. So there you go. The latter publications investigate the gendered risks and opportunities in Marcellus Shale gas boom towns and the experience of rural school leaders in a Marcellus Shale community. Dr. McHenry Sorber has presented at numerous conferences, including the annual meetings of the National Rural Education Association and the American Educational Research Association. She won the NREA Howard A. Dawson Best Research Paper Award in 2016, and she serves as a consulting editor for the Journal of Research in Rural Education, as chairperson of the advisory board for the Rural Educator, and as a member of the NREA Higher Education and Research Committee. So as you can tell, she has a lot of knowledge in this area, and we are very thankful for her participation as our moderator. So I'll leave it to you, Erin.
Thank you, Christy. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. I want to say that 2 of our higher ed students have been doing their service learning through our Colleges and Communities class with the Center for Community Engagement. And that is how I have come to be here with all of you today. And I'm so thankful for this opportunity. So we have with us today Dr. Tammy Moore, Associate Professor of Educational Foundations, Leadership, and Aviation at Oklahoma State University, also Director of the Center for Public Life. Dr. Don A. Pennington, Assistant Research Professor of Human Physiology and Program Leader of Family and Consumer Sciences, and a member of the West Virginia State University Extension Service Team, and Dr. Sarah Worley, Associate Professor of Communications, Director of Community Engaged Learning at UNIATA. So we have a range of wonderful expertise with us today, and we're so excited to learn from all of you. One of the questions that I'd like to start with, I think, goes back to some of the work that Jorge highlighted that WVU is engaged in, right? Which is thinking about how universities can support community engaged scholarship, academic community engagement, and in effective ways. And so I'm curious to hear from our panelists how you feel institutions can support incentives for community engaged scholarship, whether that's promotion and tenure or other structures, and how we can work to really gain buy-in and support from our academic leaders. So Tammy, maybe I'll start with you and then others can jump in.
My mute button and I were not getting along well. So my apologies for the pause. So first of all, I want to say thank you very much for the invitation to join you all. It's really great to be with so many wonderful West Virginians today. So something I was thinking about as I was listening to Dean Attili speak about the work at West Virginia University is the importance of the mentoring and support for advanced graduate students and early career faculty. I may be jumping in maybe deeper into the water than what some of my colleagues on the panel will speak about, but it was good to see the Emerging Engagement Scholars Workshop mentioned earlier, and I can tell you the very quick story about that. So Angie Allen, who was a PhD student at Michigan State University, and I was in my PhD program at Washington State, we were talking one year at the Engagement Scholars Consortium about the fact that every room we went into for a session, somebody would turn around and look at us and say, well, how do they count it at your school? And we would say, that is an extraordinary question. We study higher education and we hope someday we have things to count. And so the beginning of that that workshop, was we just really were clear that there needed to be a space for people who were early in their career to develop their understanding of the work that would be counted someday. And I want to call for that as an important thing to consider. I remember at the time when I was working on my PhD, I would hear people say, and these were, established, tenured faculty members, in some instances, people who had achieved full professor or beyond, whatever that next step was on their campus. And they would say, wait until you have tenure to get involved in community university engagement. And I was just, candidly, I was annoyed. Now that I have tenure and I've been at Oklahoma State for 15 years, I understand why they said that. And so I would circle back and speak back into myself then, hoping that I would listen, that it takes a long time to establish authentic relationships that can be the foundation for mutually beneficial work. We really, we put a lot of energy through our Center for Public Life into an approach that's really about following the community's lead, rather than, as Dina Tillies was saying earlier, showing up and just saying, we're the university, let us tell you what to do. And because that takes so long, part of what I'm recognizing now in the kind of middle of my career is the responsibility that I have to create opportunities for advanced graduate students and emerging career faculty members to be part of our projects and part of the scholarship that we do, so that early in their career, they're able to generate the kinds of publication record, the involvement maybe in grants, the service that is something other than, I was on the committee to name buildings that never met for 3 years. That was the advice I got from my school head in my first year, was get on a committee that never does anything. And I just was resistant to that because of the work that I wanted to do. And I'm really excited now to be in a place where we're able to, through the center, we're able to pull people into those kinds of experiences.
Thank you. Dante, Sarah, do either one of you want to add to that?
Yes, I kind of like Dr. Moore's approach. Here at a 1890s land-grant HBCU institution here at West Virginia State, we do focus on faculty development, but a lot of our development and a lot of our resources are implemented on developing students and developing people in the underserved community. So here we mostly focus on 1890 scholarships, which help our students in the community develop their pedagogy within any of the extension disciplines, be it from agriculture to family consumer sciences to economic development. And we have a scholarship in place that allows students to matriculate in our university, but with specific emphasis on developing these community development extension academic program through the academic programs. These programs allow the student to be enriched and ingrained in extension services, be it through agricultural development, which could be in extension services where they're developing trees or plants, or working with our research scientists in the laboratories to look at microgreens and just all the nuances that are done in the laboratory, but then having that real world implementation in that 1890 scholarship with the student from the laboratory skills. Myself and family consumer sciences, we look specifically at some of the deprivations that exist in the state of West Virginia and social disparities, as well as the physiological disparities that exist. And we combine as well with research. So a lot of the program that we have in this 1890 scholarship is bridging research and extension, and then developing those resources in the laboratory, but then showing real world implementation through this scholarship and through our academic partners in the communities here in West Virginia.
Yeah,
So,
and sorry, go ahead.
No, so I think that being able to provide a scholarship that helps develop students with specific emphasis in extension, and then applying that research methodology, which is kind of boots on the ground behind the scenes, but then applying that with the extension advocation. I believe that this scholarship will reap students benefits, as well as the academic community and the state of West Virginia at large.
Thank you, Dante. I'll just chime in that Juniata College is a little different, I think, than some of the other panelists in terms of its context. We're a small private liberal arts college in central rural Pennsylvania. And so, you know, some of our mission is different. We're not driven by the same sort of land grant purpose, right, as other institutions, but we've been having similar conversations about purpose and what is the purpose of liberal arts education in the 21st century. What does that look like? What role, what obligations do we have in, you know, in that context and space to contribute to the public good? And so, you know, one of the things that has been really important, we also received the Carnegie classification in 2020. And in large part, I think it has to do with the fact that we've put a really concerted effort to align language, to align mission, to align goals. And for any of you who are paying attention, small private liberal arts colleges are, we're panicking a little bit about the cliff, the demographic cliff of 2026, which many of us will feel in some way or another, but small private liberal arts colleges in particular will likely feel that intensely with the shrinking demographic. And it's really called the question, right, about mission-driven decisions and really knowing what our purpose is and who we are and how we align across the institution. So when you asked your question earlier, there was a part of that question that had to do with buy-in, right? Buy-in with administration, but I would say also buy-in with faculty, because many of them are coming from R1 institutions where the message has been, as Tammy pointed out, don't tell anybody. You know, when you're a graduate student, don't tell anybody you want to go teach at a private liberal arts college. Don't ever say that out loud, right? If you're in an R1 program. And, you know, number two, don't tell anybody you want your research work, right, to be driven by publicly engaged scholarship. Like, just kind of keep that quiet in the background. And so a lot of the faculty who we've hired at Juniata have come out of some of those traditions and spaces, and their disciplines or their fields have not really held it up and said this, you know, this is important work, and schools promotion and tenure want to hire people who are doing these kinds of things. So it was all these pieces that felt really disconnected, and that alignment of language and mission and goals has been something I think we've had a lot of success with at Juniata and has helped us to achieve that Carnegie classification. Every discipline speaks a slightly different language, right, around this work. And so when you start to pull people together from different departments and say, well, you're talking about it this way, and you use this term and use this term, but we're kind of all still talking about the same thing. You know, we moved away from the language of service to the language of engagement, because we really wanted to emphasize the importance of those authentic relationships and partnerships with rather than for. And we did that at an institutional level. So yeah, I think being really strategic about alignment of language, of goals, talking to faculty in the way that they're motivated, right? They're motivated by language around learning outcomes and tenure and promotion. So, right, being able to connect the dots for them to why, right? Why this work. Administrators are worried about other things. They're worried about persistence and retention, and some of those kinds of concerns. And there's lots of literature and research that actually aligns good community engagement, scholarship, and work with persistence and retention. And our advancement office, they're interested in other kinds of things. There's research out there that says students who have an engaged experience as undergraduates are more likely to give back to their institutions and make donations financially. So you've got to kind of speak the language, right? You've got to find the evidence and the research and the outcomes that are going to motivate each of those different groups within the conversation to go, oh yeah, we should be doing more of this.
One of the particular questions around community engagement and students has to do with the ways in which faculty can navigate service learning courses or engagement focused courses so that there is a mutually beneficial relationship occurring between partners and communities and students, and the instructional or the curricular goals of the instructor. And so I would love for some of you to share your thoughts on how faculty can navigate those spaces.
It seems though, the faculty really need to, especially if you're going to be engaging in community, the faculty should first hit the literature and really be abreast of a lot of the population problems, the problems that exist in communities, specifically, especially in the agricultural aspect. I think in the health field, I think West Virginia kind of has already identified a lot of the disparities that exist in the community, be it diabetes, heart rate variability, hypertension. These things are currently a problem, as well as opioid use, which leads to a lot of parents, I call them non-traditional parents or grandparents raising grandchildren. And I think identifying these things in our community initially will lead to the academic partnerships that our professors and our institutions engage in our students to help prepare them for the communities that they might be working in, especially in the extension aspects. So developing a curriculum that is abreast of the problems that exist within our state, but then going on and taking those academic relationships to help develop students, as well as to promote student retention, but also given the economic disparities that exist in this community, there needs to be, or we have at this university, there should be in place opportunities for students to receive funding. So beyond the structures that exist to help support their education, but there also has to be implemented factors to help support them financially to not bear the burden in a community that already has a lot of, as I said, disparities, but then while in their curriculum, developing programs that specifically address these community needs, be them agriculturally, academically, socioeconomically, and or biomedical health-wise.
Go ahead, Tammy.
I was listening to Dr. Pennington speak just now and thinking, yes, everything he just said, yes. And something I alluded to it a little bit earlier, and I think it bears underscoring. So just for some context, quickly, Oklahoma State University's Tulsa campus, which is where I'm located, is literally built on top of the neighborhood that was destroyed in the 1921 race massacre. There is deep distrust of the institution. At one time, he's no longer president, but at one time, the president of our university, the OSU Tulsa campus, was the grandson of one of the people responsible for launching the massacre. It was just, the relationships really need to be rebuilt. And so what I would say, I mean, those are our specifics. So I would also say that helping students understand the importance of history of the place where they're located. And I don't know enough about West Virginia to be able to speak, at length about that, but I would imagine that, really understanding the culture of coal mining and the nature of the rural place that a lot of West Virginia is, that's super important. And I think the other thing that's super important is supporting students in learning how to listen to people who are not college educated and treat what they're teaching them as expertise. So all of these things that Dante's speaking about, Dr. Pennington speaking about, regarding turning to the literature, I 100% agree with that. And I think it has to happen alongside these other pieces that are about learning to engage with your place and following the lead of the folks in the community who will tell you which problems are the ones that need to be addressed right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with both of my colleagues on those comments. And at Juniata, one of the things that we did semi-recently was completely revamp our general education curriculum. And in that new curriculum, we have created a local, what we call a local engagement experience for every student at Juniata. It is built into the general education curriculum so that it is equitably accessible to all students, regardless of their POE, regardless of, we call it program of emphasis, sorry, is the term for our major. But because we know there are so many benefits to students, particularly minoritized students and traditionally underrepresented groups of students, for having these types of highly engaged, high impact learning experiences, then why would we sort of leave them there and some people get them and some people don't? We need to really build it intentionally into the curricular experience. But what we've learned too is that you have to be able to talk very explicitly and clearly with students about why, why it's there, why we did that. And it's not just that service requirement. And local doesn't mean Huntington. And so we've had these really interesting conversations with each other and with students to explain local means highly contextualized, place-based learning experience, which includes both of what my previous colleagues on this panel have said about the importance of kind of knowing where you are, who you're doing the work with, what the histories are. In our community, the government claimed eminent domain over 26 miles of a valley here and flooded it as a flood mitigation project to control flooding downstream in Harrisburg. And so these rural communities here have a lot of distrust for institutions. And that was in the 70s. That was within the lived experience of many people here, families whose farms are on the bottom of this lake, churches and towns, that were just sort of left empty, and the lake exists. And now it's like one of the major economic drivers for this county is the lake. But our students don't know that until we tell them that or give them reason to learn that. And then they realize why they're in a place where the politics and the tone of things is really distrustful. And it changes kind of everything when you're that explicit with them, both about where they are, but why we've asked them to learn through this particular type of experience. And so, yeah, we shouldn't keep it a secret, We should help them understand how it connects to career, how it connects to, learning success and those types of outcomes.
I'm just nodding my head through all of this as someone who does a lot of research in rural communities and leadership in rural communities. All of this is resonating with me. So we've talked a little bit about how we navigate some of those curricular challenges. One of the other challenges that folks who have joined us today are interested in thinking through is how we make our engaged research results or findings more accessible to the communities that we're engaging with. And so I'd love to hear your expertise on navigating this particular challenge.
It seems to me, though, to help navigate or to help bridge the gap that exists between potential extension services and research capabilities, there has to be a approach that's from translational research aspects. So for those who may not understand, translational research is taking research that is applied and then also combining that with something that can be implemented. So long story short, research-based outcomes with extension implementation. But designing projects that are specifically identifying translational research projects or translational research ideas. If that is, which is kind of difficult because it takes a little bit of buy-in from the researchers and from the extension community, which at different times speak different languages. So but approaching research grants and approaching research scholarships with a translational research ideal, I think will lead to better implementation within communities, because then you have the researchers who are very linear minded, combining their linear minds and the research approach and the data approach with extension outcomes who are obviously we're very community based. So if you have that, which provides a data sets that we can not only show from the research aspects to improve the extension outcomes, but then have extension logic models that are equivocal to the data processes that have been designed in the research laboratories. So from a long story short, designing translational research projects that implement extension outcomes with research design-based protocols. I think that in itself will help that crosstalk between different aisles of ideal, and then help further perpetuate and help embody the outcomes in the communities, or the community-based outcomes.
Thank you. Tammy or Sarah, do you want to add to that?
I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. I'm really bad at explaining complex ideas to people who aren't already kind of in the know about part of them. So I thought I would name that, just so you know that just because I do community engaged work doesn't mean that I don't still have an area to learn in. So I've done a couple things, and I think these might be useful, even if you're not somebody who recognizes, like, and I have experiences where I'll be talking about stuff and they just start to do this, and I think they don't have any idea what I'm talking about. So a couple things that are just really practical. I had a graduate student once who I have never seen anybody explain material so clearly to anybody. I've seen him talk to different audiences. So I reached out to him and said, hey, I know you finished your degree 8 years ago, but you're really good at this. Would you, and he also knew a little bit about engagement. And I said, would you be willing to have conversations with me periodically where you help me find the parts of this that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't translate outside my, higher ed kind of background? There's also a series of videos that I'll have to find a couple and send them back, maybe to my colleagues in the Center for Engaged Learning at West Virginia. But here's the idea. It's somebody who's an expert talking about an idea to a 5-year-old, a 5th grader, a high school student, somebody who's in college, somebody who's a graduate student. And it's been really helpful to me to kind of parse apart what the differences are in how those ideas are talked about, and how the conversation is structured. So really thinking about that's been super useful as part of the translational research goal. The other thing is, this maybe seems in some ways, I'm a little bit just kind of rejecting the idea of university-led research, or not rejecting, but pushing back against it. We are in the middle of a community-based participatory research project that is really trying to get at what's behind the significantly lower outcomes around Black reproductive health in Tulsa. We have a huge issue here. And the work is being driven by a cohort of community members who themselves have negative experiences. And the person who's leading the training of these folks is a community organizer, and we're partnering with him. So we're trying to use some approaches that engage community members in the research, so that what we generate is meaningful to people who have the lived experience as it's being produced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it reminds me, Tammy, of some work that we're doing here as well. And I did share in the chat, I'm sorry for taking up so much chat space, but some folks asked about the local engagement requirement. And so I just dropped the language there. And I'll also just add that, you know, we used Karen McTighe-Musel's Civic Learning Spiral as kind of the basis for articulating those learning outcomes for the requirement. But what you were saying, Tammy, about the importance of being able to both communicate the information to communities and make it accessible and understandable, while also having involved them in the communication the entire way through the process, right? From the identification of need to the target populations and questions. We've been, for the last couple of years, my colleague and I have been leading community health coalition effort. We've used the AmeriCorps Vista program to really build out some interesting community health-based initiatives through partnerships with the local hospital and our federally qualified health center and school districts. And we just keep racking our brain, like, what is our role in this community ecosystem, right? We've got service providers, we've got education, right, resources, we've got various human health services. We're not any of those things. So what do we bring to the table? What do we offer? What can we contribute to all these entities and what their goals and mission and objectives are? And the thing that we keep coming back to is, we have access to evidence and research and methods and the knowledge to make sense of those things and make them understandable and help other people to use them and utilize them for evidence-based decision making. And that has definitely been the central focus for us moving forward of how we're trying to do this work with the community, is to not step on toes, which we have found is really easy to do if you don't know who's already doing what. People get really territorial when they see you coming and they think you're going to try to do what they're doing, and they just withdraw. And so that's been a big part of our mindfulness about entering into the spaces with humility and understanding that there are already people here doing really good things and working really hard. And how do we help them get better, greater success faster is kind of, I think, what's driving our attempt to fit into the ecosystem somehow.
Mm-hmm.
One of the really specific challenge points for some folks, or perhaps important learning or transformational points for others, has been when we're thinking about context, the ways that COVID has influenced engagement, work, partnerships, relationships. So if any of you have some experiences that might help illuminate the ways that has shaped in some way, or if you have experienced challenges stemming from COVID in engagement work, how you have overcome those, that would be beneficial, I think.
I'd like to answer this question in twofold. I believe COVID has allowed for there to be a huge influx in funding, specifically with the CDC, and developing immunization and vaccination protocols that can be implemented specifically in at-risk or targeted communities. The work that we've been fortunate to do here at our 1890s University, specifically funded through the CDC and in collaboration with Dr. Tilley's at WVU as collaborators for this research project, we've been able to kind of pivot from COVID and the unfortunate losses that it has developed, or it has mitigated on our community, to taking that information and taking some of our resources and pooling them to further design and further develop protocols and programs that help elucidate, as well as to allow for immunization for COVID vaccines and other immunizations that we could administer in our communities. Now, that being said, the second fold to that is developing, I call it myth busting, but developing health literacy understanding. Our community is very West Virginia itself seems to be very close-knit, and at times the small communities are tribal. Everyone can talk about how your football team from your community versus the next, which is kind of like tribalism in itself. So getting away from the stigmas that are false, and then developing literature and health literacy programs, as well as literature to help further understand, or help the community further understand the implications of COVID, and how the development, or how the putting together the ideas and getting rid of the myths can help build the community in itself. So, and I'm fortunate that WVU had a lot of resources, so we were able to come in with our agents during COVID, still have town hall meetings, which identified immunizations and viralizations. We'll say, use the science words here, viralizations from the COVID and from rubella, chickenpox, the flu, things like that. But then with our WVU partners, have the antibodies in the back of the room that can be administered by the nurses. So I think getting the community to the specific locations, educating them through health literacy and through health pamphlets and through community engagements, then having the scientific know-how to have nurses on the ready to help provide these, which can be at no expense or no cost to the participants, to develop these programs which allow for information and then administer, to do administration or administer. I think that in itself has been really key within the state to help minimize the health risks that exist.
Yeah, I have also noticed the increase in resources and funding opportunities, I think, that are out there post-COVID for both for universities and for community partners. And sometimes I think the struggle for our community partners is they see those resources, but if they don't have the capacity to act as their own fiduciary, or don't have the proper ability to kind of deal in grant compliance and things like that, then they see that money and they say, well, that looks nice, but we don't have a grant writer, or we don't have that sort of fiduciary ability, and I think that's one of the ways that universities and colleges can really help in this opportunity, in this moment, in this time, to say, yeah, there are resources out there, let's get them, let's bring them here for the good of this whole community, and so we've seen some of that creativity happening at Juniata and among some of our community partners, going, oh, look at that money, look at that money. How do we kind of maneuver together to maybe try to take advantage of it? Similarly, I think one of the good things that I've noticed coming out of COVID is that because every sector of a community felt COVID in some way, it had this really interesting unifying effect. And entities that don't typically talk to each other became more willing and interested in collaborating and kind of doubling down together on COVID. I think if we can harness that going forward, that cross-sector pollination and partnership on other issues, we can really see, I think, some of the improvements to overall community health and well-being. Maybe we can move the needle more even, on those in the way that Dr. Pennington is talking about, because we need all those sectors to come and be part of the, effort to resolve them and to address them.
It's funny, as I was listening to Sarah and Dante speak, I kept thinking, wow, you all pivoted, and your colleagues and your institutions, in this really interesting issue-driven way. And what I am aware of related to COVID is more about the power of Zoom as a meeting space. I had received a small pot of funding to establish a fellowship program that brought university students and community members together to focus on community-driven problem solving. And we were launching our cohort. In fact, we were holding the interviews to select members when the city government issued the shelter in place order it was April 2020. And so we had a decision to make. Do we go forward with this, or what do we do? And we just moved everything online and kept going. So we've gotten really good at being in these virtual spaces and being comfortable in them. So there's this way in which even my participation in this event this morning is it's a very COVID sort of product, and that I really love. And the other thing that it's made possible that I hope we don't lose is the number of conferences and learning opportunities that have had a virtual option. Like I have mixed feelings about them, as somebody who's attended a lot of conferences, and I love conferences. I could just spend my whole career doing that. But what I've seen is that we've had members of our community who couldn't take time out of their life to be gone, 3 days to wherever, but they are able to participate in a session and have people in one instance, we presented at an international conference on that project I was telling you that we just moved immediately to Zoom. And there were people from Latin America, from around the United States, from Canada, and my participants, the folks that were on our panel, were blown away that they had people in Central America listening to them like they had wisdom to share. And it was really fun to say, you do know a lot. And I love that being able, the way in which that it connects our community, people in our communities, with folks that they may not in other circumstances have the opportunity to connect with.
I'm thinking in hearing the three of you talk that you have a wealth of experience and knowledge in engaging with communities and working together to help identify issues with which the university would engage. But for people who are joining us today who are graduate students or who are faculty and staff who don't have any of this experience, I wonder if you might share some strategies or some examples of how the beginnings of that work happen.
Mm-hmm. I would say if I was beginning from a student, the approach that I would take as a student would be to fully ingrain myself in the literature before you can have any idea of implementation or design of a logic model or implementing a specific type of protocol. You have to be well enriched in the problem itself before you can identify target ways to minimize a problem. You have to be fully engaged in understanding what the problem is. So as a student, I would say, go back to the literature in itself, become very comfortable with understanding specific problems and or mechanisms and or logic models that can be applied sociologically, and or if you're looking at it something from the research aspect, looking at the disease model and then all the biomarkers associated. I would say as a student, that would be my first step. As a faculty member, I can only speak from a junior faculty member standpoint, but from a junior faculty standpoint, it would be developing protocols and shooting for the small grants that you know are attainable, but then working collaboratively with some of the senior faculty members, as well as potential research and extension members to help shoot for the larger R01s, or in the 1890 land grant, the CDGs, or USD and FDA grants that you can get yourself as a co-PI, but then maybe shoot for the larger NSF grants that help identify and target specific models that you hope to minimize within your community, which goes back to being well-versed in the literature. So I think that would be the initial response as a student and as a junior faculty member. I'm sure Dr. Moore can speak more of a senior faculty aspects of it, and I would love to hear that from her.
That just tickles me, Dr. Pennington. I want to record you saying senior faculty member and play it into my future. I'm preparing to put my portfolio together for promotion to full professor. So I think I'll include that in that that recording. So it may not come as a surprise to the group that, like a previous answer where or a previous question, Dr. Pennington responded to it by saying, go to the literature. And I said, yes, and I would say simultaneously, it's sort of like, so speaking to my graduate student colleagues for a minute, it's a little like as you start your work on a literature review for something, and you have to start with this question that you're interested in, so you know which bodies of literature to look at. But as you are reading, your question refines itself, and you are able to get more and more and more focused, or you understand, oh, okay, a recent example for one of my students, he's working on something related to academic advising, and he eventually realized, oh, I have to read the history of this, or, those kinds of things. It's like the direction I'm going, there's some specifics that I need to ground myself in. And I would say that in the case of navigating the space of being as an emerging engagement scholar, whether you are a graduate student or you're an early career faculty member, engage with the community. I had a community organizer tell me once that the way that she would enter a community is, and this had, this spoke to her positionality as a woman, as a Latina woman. So what was culturally appropriate in many of the communities where she worked was to find the women and go do whatever they were doing. Peel the potatoes, wash the dishes, cook, whatever it was, but go be in that space and contribute. And she didn't say this, but I would say, listen, and come to understand everything you can from a human experience perspective and from the literature about the people that you're working with. So in addition to the scholarly, the research on the disease model, or, we do a lot with ACEs and the adverse childhood experiences, and the research related to social capital and the social determinants of health, which is not my field. I'm a higher ed researcher. I study the role that universities play in the communities that they serve, but I'm trying to read some of this literature in related to social determinants of health. So I've got my wife will say, they don't have a shelf in their bookcase for that yet. So it's kind of a way of like, I'm trying to get some shelves, so I've got some place to put the things that I learned, but I try to never get too far away from what the community is telling me they're experiencing. Because if I do, I run the risk of showing up from the university with an answer to a problem they aren't even trying to solve. Something I did, which this is really idiosyncratic, so maybe it translates to some of you all, and maybe you've got your own version of it. I love to sing. Now, please don't misunderstand me to take that to mean that I'm good. I just like to sing. And I joined a choir. I don't know why they let me in, but I was the only white person in the choir for probably 4.5 of the 6 years that I sang in the choir. And the choir was predominantly Black women. And I learned a lot by not saying very much. I learned a lot about their experience in our church congregation, but I also learned a lot about just the experience of being in the world. And I would also say that learning to put yourself in positions where you are not of the dominant group, whatever that is, whoever the majority is, it's not you.
Yeah.
And And when you have that experience, and I would say this to, again, graduate students and to early career faculty, when you have an experience that's uncomfortable, go to a network of people to discuss your discomfort. Don't complain about it to the group. So let me put in the chat, after I stop talking, I'll do this. Let me put my phone number and my email. If you don't have anybody else in your world to do this with, reach out to me. We're working right now on an article. So our center is directed, we now have had someone join us, but for the first probably 5 or 6 years, we're white folks. And we've got white graduate students because that's primarily who was entering in our programs. So here we are from the university. We're all, reflect a dominant culture, trying to work in a community where there's historic trauma. And even if we weren't thinking about the people, most immediately on that land, our university sits on reservation land. So there's layers of history that we work to understand. And I've learned a lot about what it means to be a white academic working in a community whose people have historically been marginalized. And it carries a lot of responsibility. And so I think that's why I keep saying my counter to Dr. Pennington's points are yes, and it always goes back to listen to the community, because that is so often not happened. And you will differentiate yourself by doing that, but don't do it for a self-serving reason.
Dr. Moore, I'm going to exercise certain privilege here. Sorry, Erin. I must ask this question.
Okay.
After what you just said, what would you recommend to people that might find themselves in that situation and feel a little bit paralyzed, that they are afraid of taking the next step in that relationship because they feel, well, I don't know enough. I feel inadequate here. I'm afraid I'm going to just mess it up.
I don't know, Dr. Attiles, if this is what you are imagining I might say, but let me tell you, you will mess up. You will offend people. Maybe I shouldn't say you. I don't want to project into your life. I have offended people. Somebody I worked with for a long time, I deeply offended her. And, there were tears involved resolving some of that. But I had, one of the things that we talked about later was, well, anyway, let me say this. So my dad used to say, there's no shame in making a mistake. The problem is when you make it more than once. So if you find yourself in a situation where, well, first of all, if you find yourself in a situation and you're like, I don't really know what to do, that would be an amazing point for you to call me or send some email, and I'm happy to visit with you about it. There's also it's also important to just apologize and to name, look, I hear you saying, I said X, I hear you saying, that what you heard was Y. That was not my intention. I regret that. And I would like us to find a way, to go forward if possible. But here's the deal, is when you say, I would like us, it's possible the person is like, no. And being okay with that it's hard to do. It's hard to sit in a place where you recognize that. Somebody told me one time that this is a woman of color. She said, look, it's your privilege as a white person that makes you think that it's my job to educate you. And instead, what I've learned is that when I am given information, it's a gift. And that kind of humility is an important position to stand in. And wherever you're presented with opportunities to learn about and practice having those conversations and building the relationships. That's why I'm saying go into the communities. And because the difference for us, the difference is one of racial and ethnic background. Maybe it's going to be, in your situation, it's going to be one of a class difference, or maybe it's a gender identity or sexual orientation difference, or it's an ability difference. All of the ways and the identities that the identity markers that are points of difference. What I'm saying about our experience in the Black community here in Tulsa would apply. I think it's being genuinely committed to respecting the other person and building that relationship. Because I was telling you the woman that I deeply offended and there were tears involved. Well, I'd been working with her for 2.5 years, and we spent time together every week building our relationship as a group, the group of us that worked together. So, it took some leaning in and really talking about, here's when you said this is what I heard. And then, to some of that, I just had to listen and then go back and do the work by myself. Dr. Achilles, did that get it? What you're, okay. This is something that I feel really, really passionate about. It's so important. Because without it, you wind up with superficial partnerships that people agree to, but they don't actually change things in a fundamental way. And I feel like, I could go on. I could be with you an hour and a half on this topic. So let me just say this last thing. I said earlier that I study the role that universities play in the communities that they serve. And so largely what I study is our center and the interactions with our community partners and the work that we do to span boundaries and those kinds of things. And I find myself, nobody comes to me and says, what should we do? Like, what's the best translational medicine model? Or, what do you know about training community health workers? Like, we're in all those conversations, but that's not my expertise. What I'm good at, and I do a lot of, is, and this may speak more to some of the graduate students in higher ed than it does to faculty if you're not in that field. But I'm suspecting that the higher ed grad students might relate to this, because I'm assuming that some of you, if not all of you, work at universities and your campus well, and who does what and what the rules are, or who can help you figure out the rules. And a lot of my role is to try to figure out how to make systems work in ways that they have not been designed to work. We just had an experience with our foundation where they said, great that you just got this grant from a local hospital, but we only give money to OSU students. Can this be a grant that serves OSU students? No. So we had to be in conversation around some of those things. And so there'll be ways of operating that really have to be shifted, and you can leverage your understanding of the community and what would be most useful, what are the resources that we have as a campus, is how I think about it, that we could leverage for community partners.
I know we're coming up on time here pretty quickly, but I just wanted to kind of pull together a couple pieces that I heard. One, I heard like the idea that showing up matters. And I think it's so important, if that's part of your starting place, is showing up in places, being seen in places, starting the process of building relationships and connections with organizations and people, even if you don't know yet, you don't know all the answers, or it's not an area of expertise. Showing up and being present and curiosity matters in those spaces, asking questions and listening, right? And curiosity in the sense that a lot of people said over here in the chat, look beyond your field. And I cannot say that enough. For those of you who are grad students or trying to kind of figure out where some of this literature exists, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning is a place where lots of folks have been doing research into the teaching side, right? Researching the teaching and the effectiveness and what makes this type of pedagogy effective. And so, don't just look in the literature journals about, particular fields or, findings related to specific issues, but look at what the research says about effective teaching practices in these spaces as well. And for me, I would also say for those who are in the room trying to figure out where to start with your teaching, not your research. I know that may be really counter to say in a space like this where most folks are at R1s, but at Juniata, our tenure and promotion, we are evaluated most highly on the effectiveness and quality of our teaching and our ability to tie our scholarship to our teaching. And so, the two things are not mutually exclusive. And the more informed your pedagogy and your teaching philosophy is with regard to best practices and community engaged teaching and learning, the better your research will also be, right, when you are ready to pivot or shift to that priority. And so, that would be my kind of addition to what has been said already.
Mhm.
So I feel like unintentionally we've reached some sort of summary thoughts, and Dante, I didn't want to leave you out of this conversation at the end here. So if you have some sort of final thoughts as well that you'd like to share.
As a final thought, I think that engaging in ACE and CES definitely develops the academic community engagement as well as the community engagement and scholarship. I believe that through faculty implementation and student engagement, we can significantly change the landscape, at least for the state of West Virginia. I know everyone on the call is not in West Virginia, but specifically for those of us who are, identifying the target populations in which you wish to make a difference. And as Dr. Moore sticking with it, regardless of the attrition that you're going to go through. But then also, from what I've kind of noted on before, approaching it with a logic model, specifically if it's going to be extension, or with a protocol if you're going to approach it in the research academic aspect. But regardless of those two intentions, you still have to stick with it. As Dr. Moore has spoke numerous times, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be no, as I say, no one really likes to learn, regardless, right? From medical school to graduate school to kindergarten, no one likes to learn, specifically, and that's even in learning institutions. So imagine if you're doing something in the community. So sticking with it and just understanding that if it was an easy task, everyone would do it. So for us, those who have taken that as our responsibility and or career, there's an obligation to ourselves, but also to your community. And I think that in itself is the reminder to just maintain what you have and hope and work for better.
Thank you so much. So students who are in my class know that I take sort of feverish notes while people are talking, and I just wanted to share a couple of things that I think that I have learned in talking with all of you today. One is around the importance of language and being intentional in our language, translational in our language, explicit when we're talking about our work and the purpose of our work, doing our homework, whether that is engaging with the scholarship or intentional involvement in deep, meaningful relationships with communities, positioning ourselves as learners and listeners and placing others in the position of expert, and connecting back to our purpose, whether that's around the purpose of engagement, the purpose of institutions, the purpose of the curriculum or our teaching and learning practice, or even the purpose of higher ed as a public good. So thank you so much, Dennis. I'm going to turn things over to you now.
No, thank you. This has been so great. All I have to say is wow, wow, wow. This is so good. So thank you so much to all of the speakers, the moderator, panelists. Thank you all for sharing your time and expertise. What just a great wealth of information and great conversations we've had today. So many excellent ideas and resources shared. Hopefully everyone learned a few new things. I know I certainly did. Busy making notes as well. I really appreciate all of the interaction and discussion in the chat from the participants. Great resources provided there. So as we conclude the session today, I want to again express gratitude to all of the speakers, but also to Christy and Melissa and Madison and Ashley. Hope you get a chance to wave and recognize these folks. They brought a lot of really thoughtful ideas into planning the session. I also want to remind everyone that this is just the first of several sessions that are upcoming for next year. I think Melissa is going to be dropping, if she hasn't already, some registration information for future academic community engagement sessions in the chat, and also the excellent ACE newsletter that she worked so hard to put together. So if you're not on that list, please sign up for that. And it's not a one-way street. It's mutually beneficial for folks we work with in our partnership. So if you have anyone who would like to share information, photos, success stories for that newsletter, please reach out. If you have any thoughts or ideas to include for future sessions, let us know that as well. Really appreciate your participation. Look forward to you linking up and partnering with the Center for Community Engagement in the future. I always like to leave a minute or two for any final words. I want to thank Dina Tiles for your leadership here at WVU. And if you had any words of wisdom for us as we part.
The wisdom is within, and the wisdom is to, like Tammy and others mentioned, is to sometimes shut up and listen. Let's learn from each other. Let's learn from others that have a different way of managing knowledge. Let's be accepting of other people's views, and together perhaps we have the great hope of creating a better future for everybody. This is a very important segment of work for this university. I am so grateful that all of you who are here are participating, and I hope that in some way you are taking something away that will help you continue to grow in the greatest spectrum between outreach and engagement. So with that, I thank all of the people who participated in putting this together, our academy folks, Erin, and many others who agreed to get this challenge going. Christy, Melissa, Dennis, Mason, everybody. And of course, to our distinguished panel. Sarah, Dante, Tammy, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your great knowledge. It's always good to hear from others because sometimes we can be very preoccupied with ourselves. And it's always good to get outside our own boundaries and walls. So I learned a lot today. I am excited and have tremendous hope for this to continue to grow at our university. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that will wrap it up. I know there were lots of questions. Remember, we have more series coming down the line. If you have a particular interest area or would like a part 2 of foundations, just let us know. We will get that together for you, and we'll be looking at the chat to make sure we answered questions that were placed in there. Thank you again, everyone. Everybody has said it to justice, so thank you. We appreciate you. Have a great Friday and a great weekend and a wonderful holiday season.